Welcome to our Leadership Series webinar, co-hosted by Sanford Inspire and NCUST. My name is Amanda Rothengast, the Program Manager for Sanford Inspire, and we are honored to be co-presenting this series to support school leaders or aspiring school leaders in such challenging times. The opinions and content in this presentation are that of the featured speaker and panelists and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Sanford Inspire or NCUST. This is a recorded webinar in our series designed for you to watch at any time. We also encourage you to share it with your colleagues. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Joe Johnson, Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. My name is Joe Johnson. I serve as the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation, INCUST. INCUST identifies, awards, and studies schools that achieve outstanding learning results for all students. We're pleased to welcome you to the third session of Reopening Schools with a focus on SEL and Equity. By the end of this series, we hope that participating schools will have stronger, more complete plans for how they will ensure a socially, emotionally healthy reopening in a way that advances true equity in learning outcomes. In the first session, we emphasized why planning for reopening is so important. In the second session, our panel of experts offered many specific ideas about how educators could plan strategies for listening to the social emotional needs of students, families, and staff. Recordings and presentation slides for sessions 1 and 2 have been emailed to you. Today's session emphasizes the importance of including in reopening plans deliberate actions to respond to the social emotional needs of students as well as other stakeholders. The fourth session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 15th and will emphasize the critical importance of building the capacity of school personnel to respond to students' social and emotional needs. Remember to take note of strategies shared by our panelists so you can enhance your planning efforts for the opening of the school year. Following the session on July 15th, you'll be invited to submit a one-slide presentation outlining one aspect of your reopening plan based on the concepts discussed throughout this session. We will select a few of the slides submitted to highlight during the final session on July 30th, where our panelists will provide feedback. If you choose to submit a slide, it will be due on July 22nd. Before we proceed, my colleague at INCUST, Dr. Jose Iniguez, will recap some of the major points addressed in the second webinar session that focused on listening to the social emotional concerns of students, families, and staff. Dr. Iniguez.
Thank you for having me. I would be happy to recap. Among the numerous academic-related tasks we must attend to upon reopening schools, it's nonetheless important that we attend to listening to students, families, and staff, as our expert panel shared, because one, students are more likely to remain calm, helping mitigate anxiety-related trauma when they feel that teachers understand their needs and listen to what their needs are, identifying exactly what it is that's bothering them. Two, listening increases student agency, helping them to increase a sense of control during trying times, also helping to mitigate the loss of control felt during these trying times. And the third broad reason why it's important to listen to students despite all the things that we have to do upon reopening school is because it yields increased information about what is on the minds of students, staff, and families that in turn helps the school to address the needs both in and out of class.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iniguez. We appreciate your recap. Today, we're going to focus more specifically on how teachers, school, and district leaders can plan to respond to the social emotional issues that students, families, and staff are enduring. We're fortunate to have an impressive panel of educational experts. Today's panel includes winners of the 2019 Sanford Teaching Award. These individuals were named the top inspirational teacher in their state and qualified for the honor of being named the nation's top inspirational teacher in 2019. Our outstanding teacher panelists include Linda Amici from Alcott Elementary in Westerville, Ohio, Sarah Freyer from Woodridge International School in Washington, D.C., Leah Jelke from Fargo South High School in Fargo, North Dakota, and Claudine James from Malvern Middle School in Malvern, Arkansas. Additionally, we're fortunate to have two outstanding award-winning principals. These principals lead schools that are winners of the America's Best Urban School Award. Even though their schools serve low-income communities with all the challenges we associate with urbanicity, every demographic group of students in their school outperforms statewide averages for all students. I'm pleased to introduce Lauren Melhoit, principal of James Deanda Elementary in Houston, Texas, and Alexa Sorden, principal of Concourse Village Elementary in the Bronx, New York. Panelists, thanks so much for joining us. In the last session, we talked about the importance of planning to listen. But even before we listen, we can reasonably anticipate the importance of planning to respond in a caring manner. Ms. Jelke, are there things you have done in your classroom, big or small, that give students an opportunity to share and process important issues in their lives? Explain what you've done and how it works.
Yes, thank you. So my classroom is English learners, and they're high school students, mainly refugees from over 20 different countries. And so I find it very important to give the students the voice and the opportunity to share about their lives, about any concerns or anything that's happening with them currently. It's very therapeutic for them. So 7 years ago, when I first came to the school that I'm currently at, I did a narrative assignment that was just a simple assignment, turn it in. And in this essay, I noticed many students were discussing things about coming to the United States that I had no idea about them. I learned that some students had never gone to school before. I learned that some students at the age of high school that had gotten there had missed multiple years of school, and this was not documented or known. I've learned some trauma that the students had gone through, and I was just amazed at what they were wanting to share. They were just really, really, really excited to share this information. And so I applied for a grant and was able to get a grant to cover a project that I called Journey to America. So I wanted my students' voices out there. I wanted them to share what they wanted to share for our community, and in turn as well, growing up in Fargo, which is very a non-diverse community, I wanted our community to learn about their new neighbors that were coming here, just to help educate about different populations. So what I did is I had students from the local universities come in, and they helped the students write for about 6 weeks. And this is an ongoing project for the last 6 years. And so they sit next to the student, they help brainstorm, they help them with ideas. And as the process goes on, we have speakers come in from the community and around the United States, speakers who are refugee immigrants themselves who have become successful CEOs. And then in the end, we publish our stories. But we did 600 copies this year, hard copies of the book, Journey to America. And then the students also publish it online. and we go to the local universities after, and part of their unit for their speaking unit, they have to present their story. And so this is just a really powerful example of how to get students to be able to share. And really, a lot of students have just really been excited about being able to share pieces of their life that they want to. They don't write about anything they don't want to write about. When you come to the United States, there's a lot of different issues such as trauma. Students get to choose if they want to start their story when they landed on the soil in Fargo, North Dakota, or if they started when they were in Congo and they just learned they were coming to the United States. They get to choose where they start their story. And I think that helps empower them to really share what they want to share. And in addition, my students also were participating in a project called Green Card Voices. And in 2017, the students, we partnered with Minneapolis organization and they created a book. 31 of my students were featured in this book, and they also have online interviews about their stories about coming to the United States. And just recently in a different class, so these are all my higher level EL students. And in a different class, my students who partner with students born here in the US partner with students who are brand new to the US. It's an amazing class called Partnership for New Americans. They sat together and they helped each other write their stories for the We Are America project that just came out this month. And this is a project by Jessica Lander in Massachusetts, and she's getting teachers from all over the United States to participate. And the idea of this book is to share voices of teens around the US about different challenges they've had in their lives. And so my students who are first and second level were able to contribute to this book with the help of their mentors. And also there are audio recordings on weareamericaproject.com that you can use and share with your staff and your students to listen to my students in their original voices read their stories about how they had a challenge in their life as a teenager. So really, my goal as a teacher is really to engage my students, create empathy, and empower them to share their stories.
What a wonderful answer. The idea of giving students voice is so important as we think about reopening school, considering all of the things that students and families are dealing with today. Ms. James, what have you done in your classroom to give students an opportunity to share and process important issues in their lives?
Thank you. So one of the things that I've done for the last 7 years is to start my students on a journey at the beginning of the school year. And at the end of the school year, our journey ends with us actually having an exhibit that is hosted at our local community college. And this exhibit is a way for my students to be civically engaged, to use their voices to raise awareness of some sort of social ill. In 2018, the name of our exhibit was We the People, and we highlighted in our exhibit all the people of the United States and what our country was actually made of. And then following We the People, the next year in 2019, the name of the exhibit was called Stories of Hope. And this year's past year, 2020 exhibit was Raising Our Voices. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we weren't able to actually host the exhibit. So this coming year, we're going to host it again, and it's going to be called Raising Our Voices again. And so what I have my students do is read multicultural literature. And as we're reading the multicultural literature, we're finding our voices through the voices of the characters we read. And each student picks a book that we read, and then they, in turn, at the exhibit, present that book. The books vary in ranges from picture books all the way up to college level books because I teach advanced classes. And so the exhibit is a way for my students to invite the community, and not only the community, but from students from the lower grades and upper grades, and to show them how passionate they are about the issues in which they're sharing. And they use this around literature. I am very, very happy that this particular initiative that I've started has become a well-rounded, look forward to event in our community. And so it's a civic engagement project which involves multicultural literature and ends in a community-wide exhibit.
Thank you, Ms. James. those are excellent ideas that could be useful for teachers as they plan to reopen their classrooms. Principal Malhoit, let's take the question beyond one classroom and apply it to an entire school. Have there been initiatives at DeAnda, either big or small, that give students an opportunity to share and process important issues in their lives? What's happened and how has it worked?
Yes, absolutely, and thank you. So part of the verbiage in a section of our school mission is to empower scholars. And so when we're planning and we're working in the school capacity, we make sure that empowering scholars is a living part of our mission. So we frequently and routinely look for opportunities to create ownership and build agency within our students. So the first piece comes with instructional planning. The core of our instructional philosophy is organic reading and writing. And I love that we just heard Ms. James say she leverages literature because we do the same. So we know that teachers get to know their students and build relationships because that's critical for success of students. But being able to learn about their backgrounds and their ideas and being intentional around the planning of those supports. So if you are serving students that have a certain background or have a certain interest, creating opportunities instructionally to support those. We also regularly have writing that is responsive to thought-provoking literature. So like Ms. James just mentioned, using multicultural literature and really exploring voices of characters, but also putting into our lessons in our classrooms current events. So when the Australian forest fires were going on, we had our students researching about forest fires, what was going on in Australia, but then to write and respond with action on what they would do or how they could help. We also use current event and literature pieces that are age appropriate by leveraging Time for Kids or Newsella and giving students an opportunity for free writing, just to write their responses and their thoughts, also during workstations for some of our lower grades. We also are very inquiry based, and because of that belief, we offer a space for students to do independent research projects every 9 weeks, including our pre-K learners. So from pre-K all the way up to 5th, we ask that students learn in the classroom from the teachers, but the teachers afford them opportunity to transfer that learning to real life. One such example is our 5th graders did a unit in February on Black history, and the students got to choose how they wanted to show their transfer. And one such group actually compared and contrasted the civil rights movement of the 1960s with the LGBTQ movement of today. And that was student agency. That was student-centered. At our school, we also have our counselor that meets with groups based on need. So we support our students if, depending on, again, the support that they need. So there's a grief group, there's a self-esteem group, there's a family concern group. And then we also have other opportunities where we leverage celebrations. Our 5th grade students, again, had a poetry jam. The teachers created the space by teaching the traditional learning objectives around poetry, but took it one step further to show how students could express themselves through their writing. Parents came to school and assisted with decorations. Students provided the content and the sharing of their feelings in their lives. And then, of course, admin supported by showing up, but also with hot cocoa and some cookies. So there's a lot of ways at DeAnda that we do that, and please know that this list isn't all-inclusive, but I'm excited to learn from other panelists on other ways to support our students and allow them to share their voice.
Thank you so much, Principal Malhoit, for giving these practical ideas about how we can empower students. There's certainly been so much over the past few months that may have felt moving in the opposite direction, where students might feel like they've lost power because of COVID-19 and the racial strife, etc. And so these kinds of activities that give students voice and empower them are so important. Ms. Amici, teachers in our audience are interested in knowing what they can do to make reentry a more positive experience for students, especially those students who've experienced highly stressful situations. As your school prepares to reopen, what do you plan to do to make reentry a more positive experience for those students who've experienced really tough situations?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. My first plan of action is to meet individually each student separately, whether that be a digital entrance and I meet with them in a video conference sort of manner, one by one, or if it's physical school, I can meet with them via video conference in the first week of school or before school. I just really want to know as much as humanly possible about each of my students. And I believe that this is a really important thing to do, to get to know what each child has struggled with, where each child is. I am like the queen of the Google Forms. So I always send out a survey asking them lots of different things. You know, what is it that they are struggling with? What's a challenge? What would they like to see improved in the world? What kind of global issues concern them? Those kinds of things. So I can find out everything that I possibly can about what is going on in their mind. So gathering information ahead of time on that. Then that will give me a little background as I meet with each student to be able to prompt them if they get shy. Sometimes they do. So I intend also to listen then with the intent to understand. I love Celeste Headley's TED Talk. If you haven't listened to it, that would be a good thing to write down on your action plan. It's called 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. And she talks about creating you know, intentional opportunities to be mindful and be present with students and to always listen and be prepared to be amazed. And I have always felt that way with my students. I'm always amazed if I stop and, you know, just without an agenda, let my mind actually focus it on that moment of mindfulness and listen to them. I'm always amazed by different things that they say or feel. In terms of helping support them, in terms of helping students support one another, I do a lot of group work. I always start the year with really digging into growth mindset work, Dr. Carol Dweck's work, and really the premise that the brain gets stronger as we face really tough challenges head on and really fail forward until we succeed. So my students work together, which may look a little more digital than physical this year, to discover that failure is to be expected, not something to work to avoid at all costs. And I think that kind of takes down the risk level a little bit so that they can actually, it enables them to take more risks, to have that more productive struggle and strengthen their brain really. With project-based work, students have opportunities to connect with experts, to share to an authentic audience. And so then they share their growth mindset discoveries with different audiences. So that's just a few of the ways, just to create space for them to be able to, you know, voice their concerns and their what bothers them.
Ms. Amici, thank you for amazing us with that answer. So Ms. Jelke, how about you? What do you plan to do to make reentry a more positive experience for your students?
So as a teacher of EL high school students, as I had mentioned, my students are mainly refugees with a few immigrants as well. And I always approach my classes and students with the assumption that there has been some trauma or difficult situations, because 99% of the time there has. So when we take the pandemic on top of that, that's just expounds everything. And one of my students, during the end of our online learning that we had live Zoom classes here in North Dakota that the students attended. And I noticed she wasn't attending the class towards the end. She was an A student. I was really concerned. So I reached out to her and asked her what was going on. And she told me that her father had been laid off because of the virus, and she had to take night shift. So she was working overnights, and she was actually the only person in her house paying the bills with that money. And so understanding that, I was able to work with her and accommodate her. If I had not reached out to her and asked her what was going on, she would have just disappeared from my class and failed. So the idea to reach out to your students and to make sure you continue that relationship with them, to understand them, is just crucial. I also had a student who did something similar, but it was only 2 days she missed, and then she popped back on. I asked her privately what was going on, and she explained to me she actually had the virus and she was in the hospital for 2 days. And it was very difficult for her family to deal with because her family members had also tested positive. So these type of situations that are happening now, you know, as you can see, to younger people, it happens to anyone with the virus. They are affecting our students for sure in every way, whether it is a high school student having to take on extra jobs because they need more money for their family, or I have a lot of students who are babysitting because family members had to go to work, parents had to go to work, and they had to take care of their brothers and sisters at home. And so their online learning experience was not what it could have been. And so when I go back to my classroom, the first thing I'm going to do is acknowledge it. I'm going to acknowledge to my students that I understand that everybody did not have an equitable experience with online learning. I'm going to acknowledge that you had to babysit or you had to go to work and it wasn't your fault. I think letting high school students know and any students know that you know that they had situations in their life that were out of their control really helps put them at ease to say, okay, she's understanding. She's going to start with us where we're at. And with that, I think it's important too that I share my personal stories about how the pandemic affected me and my own children at home, as well as asking the students, help me understand what happened in your life during this time period. And by doing that, I always like to have my students write a letter to me at the beginning of the year, and we call it what I want my teacher to know. And so I have my students sit down and I just say, write me a page about what you want me to know about you. What do I want my teacher to know about me? And so many amazing things come from that. Only I read it. They don't read it out loud. Nobody else sees it, but they share a lot of really important things with me at the beginning of the year. And I think this is going to be crucial this year. And then also I'm going to continue my mindfulness every day. The first 5 minutes of class, we do mindfulness meditation with my students. And so we turn off the lights. We have a guided meditation every day. It changes from day to day. And we just sit and we focus and we become mindful. And I think that's going to be crucial, even more so in the situation that we are coming from today.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer. Reaching out, acknowledging differences, asking questions, not assuming. Those are such important lessons for us all to think about and plan for as we go back into this coming school year. Let's get the school-wide perspective from Principal Sorton. As Concourse Village prepares to reopen, what plans do you have to make reentry a more positive experience for students and staff who've experienced highly stressful situations?
Hi, hello, Dr. Johnson. That's another great question. And one of the things that our school community is beginning to do is creating videos of what school will look like moving forward. So videos that will show how do we enter the building, videos that show how the classrooms will be set up, videos that show the new protocols that will be in place. So we're going to begin creating those videos beginning in July, and then what we do is we create it as a YouTube link so that we could text the videos to families, and then they can watch it over and over again, and then if they have questions, then they text us back. So using YouTube as our way to share information with families has been very positive because it's just a link that they could access anywhere. So in order to take away from the anxiety and stress of the unknown, we want to create footage that shows them what life moving forward will look like at Concourse Village.
Great, that's a really important strategy, making the unfamiliar familiar to your students so that they feel that they can be successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all those inspirational ideas and concrete examples. Let's give our audience a moment to pause and write down 2 or 3 of the specific ideas they've heard so far that teachers and principals can do to respond to students' social and emotional issues.
We hope you already have some good ideas to drive your planning for your school's reopening, but let's talk specifically about how educators can help students support each other. This might be especially important given the divisive issues that have flooded the media in recent weeks. Ms. Freyer, how can teachers structure opportunities for students to support each other and make school reopening a more positive experience? What are your plans to make this happen in your classroom?
Thank you so much for that question. So for me, I always start with understanding that support looks different for everyone. So one thing that I am going to incorporate that I've done in the past is for my students to take the 5 love language quiz for students. There's one online for ages 5 and up, and then there's one for 8 to 15 or 16 in the teens. And with that, I get to know the students, what their love language is, and then I tell the students what it means and how other students receive love and support, right? And then with that, there's a really good book for the elementary level that goes with it. It's a children's book. It's called A Perfect Pet for Peyton by Dr. Gary Chapman. And I read that, and we go over what that love language looks like and how to show support. Then I get to have the students model that for each other. One way that I did that during virtual learning this past few months ago when we were in virtual learning was that we would get into breakout rooms, and I would strategically put people together that had different love languages to understand, and I would model. And for example, if it was someone that needs physical touch and that looks like for support for them, we can't physical touch right now. But we would do different emotions and let them know we're sending hugs. This meant back rub and then a high five, right? For those that need physical touch. And then for words of affirmation, I talked to them about that, what that looks like, what that sounds like. So then they got to go into groups with people and practice that. And then it was so cool to see how that went on during the lessons. Like when people knew that other people needed support, they would say, hey, Mark, I'm sending you a hug. You got this. It's okay. It's okay. Hang in there. And so it was really good to model for them, have them practice, and then they would do it. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I love the idea of teaching the 5 love languages to our students. So, Ms. Amici, how about your classroom? How will you structure opportunities for students to support each other and make school reopening a more positive experience?
That's a great question, Dr. Johnson. I think that collaboration really helps promote support for students. And with project-based work, there are lots of opportunities for students to collaborate with one another. So there's just a special bond when they're working together to create something for an authentic audience that is relevant to them, where they're working together and they, can support one another. Typically in that kind of work, I have them start off with group norms. So they create group norms for their own group. And I encourage them to make those really comprehensive, and then also to think, kind of ideate through what happens if a team member isn't really adhering to those group norms. And it's been very interesting to see how students that are given the agency to create their own group norms for themselves, how they manage themselves and take ownership of their work and their behavior and their collaboration skills. So typically, when students start out doing those kinds of things, they'll come to me and say, say Billy Bob Joe isn't helping us. He's not doing, work with this student, with the group like he's supposed to. And it's fantastic to be able to say, well, what did you guys decide to do about that? And give the agency back to the students, so that then they're like, oh, at first when I do this, they're like, wait a minute, she's not going to solve this. We have to solve this ourselves. So then they kind of work through, what did you write in your group norms? You need to maybe add another thing in your group norms. So students work together. I think I've always been more of a digital kind of, I've relied a lot on digital for my projects, and this year I'm really thankful that I've done that. So I have them create the group norms within a template kind of thing, and give them some direction within that, and then meet with them in small groups. I really think that meeting with teams in small groups really helps them to feel understood and to be able to work through. A lot of times, I told you I'm a survey queen, so a lot of times I will send out a survey and ask ahead of time, how are things going in your group? And are there any way, how can I support you? And the responses then will come to me in survey form in a more anonymous way. So I have that background knowledge, so that when I meet with the teams, I'm able to come in an informed way. And so if I say, how's it going? What's going on with the team as I'm sitting there? And they say, oh, it's fine, it's all right. Then typically I'll address that in a respectful way and say, sometimes in teams, you might have the issue. I don't know if your team has had this, but where, you feel like the work maybe isn't divided equally and it's not quite fair. I wonder how we could work on that. And then I offer some suggestions. So it's a great way to help them kind of bond together, to support one another and make it a more positive experience for everybody, including the teacher.
That's a great answer. We recognize the importance of collaboration for helping students learn academic content, but I think your answer helps illustrate how important it is to use collaboration to help students learn how to support each other. So thank you so much. Ms. James, as you plan to return to school, what are one or two things you're planning to do to help your colleagues in grade level teams, departments, or professional learning communities develop plans that respond to the social emotional needs of students and families?
Thank you for that question. And ironically, it's such a unique opportunity for me this year, because I am a lead teacher and I will be the veteran teacher in our English language arts department. And so with that, I'm charged with helping the novice teachers develop their own plan to address the social and emotional needs of students. One of the things that I hope to do is to start a community read between not only our department, but other departments as well. One of the books that I found very engaging in the last couple of years is called Jacqueline Woodson's Harbor Me. And in the book, it talks a lot about the different students that are in our classroom, different social economic statuses, their learning abilities, and also race and just daily issues that they deal with. And for me, it was a real eye-opener, because it showed me all the different students that each teacher should be able to deal with. So that's one of my things that I'm strictly going to be advocating for, as a common read among our department. But as a lead teacher in my department, what I'm going to do is send out a daily email. And in that daily email, it's going to be a did you know? And it may be a simple, did you know that Jimmy's mom, has left the home and she's no longer there, and Jimmy's staying with his grandmother? Or it may be a community-wide. Did you know that the Martin Luther King Commission is planning a car wash next Saturday? But to get our students and our faculty involved and be on the common ground of being resourceful and learning about our students and their needs. There was a poem out that was circulating. It was a digital, I really can't say it's a poem, it's sort of more like a call to action. It says, "Cause I ain't got a pencil." And that was the actual name of it. But it was talking about all the things that the student does before they get to school. And then when they get to school, the teacher asks them, do they not have a pencil? And so one of my teachers actually read that and said, you know what, Ms. James, I didn't think about that. And I was like, yes, that happens all the time. And so I'm asking the district this year to make sure all students have a pencil. I mean, I know that sounds like it's simplistic, and it is. So we also are addressing the social emotional needs of our students. Our district normally has a backpack to school where they pay for all of their kids' back to school supplies. But in the last year or two, they've also given the teachers additional pencils to give away, just simply because you don't know a child's story. And I have a poem in my room that I wrote, but the title of the poem is "Don't Judge Me because You Don't Know My Story." And that's what I plan on sharing that message with all of the novice teachers is don't judge that student because you really don't know where they come from. Thank you so much for this opportunity and for me to be able to share my ideas with all of you.
And thank you so much for sharing. Your ideas illustrate how important teacher leaders can be in making a difference throughout their school. What about you, Ms. Freyer? What are one or two things you plan to do to help your colleagues develop plans that respond to the social emotional needs of students and families?
Thank you for that question. So I lead district professional developments every Friday for kindergarten to second grade teachers. And one of the things that I'm working on is one of the professional developments that I want to talk to teachers about. It's going to call It Starts with N. And that part in that PD, I want to talk to teachers about really understanding to get to know what's inside of our students, how they're feeling, and how to use best practices of emotional social learning and incorporate that in all of our lessons, in all of our academic lessons, to understand that it's okay to take a break and not go by the script all the time, because there's no learning can take place if they're not emotionally there and in tune. Another professional development that I plan to work with the teachers is for the families. During this time, one of the strategies that I use with the families to get the families engaged and make sure that they feel a part of it and not feeling stressful is it was called Everyone Does a Brain Break. And for Everyone Does a Brain Break, before we move on to the other lessons, I would have the parents or the family members that are at home with the child to take a moment with us to all do yoga or meditation. Another thing would be to make a video and do dance moves and everything. Another way to get families engaged so it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm at home just trying to work and teach my scholar is that I would make competitions. We would have TikTok videos of who was paying attention. And so the kids and their families would go home, well, they're at home. They would go and make a TikTok video to talk about what they learned, and we would share the best TikTok video. So that was a really good strategy, and the families loved it. They were engaged. They didn't feel punitive. And the other thing that I'm going to talk to my colleagues about is when we're dealing with families, take time out to work with them before the students get on the platform of the learning device if we're online. For example, I had my parents get online with me, they wanted to practice what does Zoom look like, right? All the things on Zoom, how to use Zoom with your scholar, how to use Nearpod, because that's another platform we were using. And once the parents got comfortable with it, and then they were able to show it with their student, and I was sitting there practicing with them, it was easier for them to get on and start the learning. It wasn't just like, oh, I can't understand what's this, and I can't get on Nearpod, I can't get on Zoom. So take that time out to do the work ahead of time and don't jump right into the academics. So I'm really going to talk to my teachers about really strategically planning out what support looks like for your families and take the time to do that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Those are wonderful suggestions, great strategies, Ms. Freyer. Thank you for taking that leadership responsibility. Since we're talking about helping colleagues prepare to respond, let's turn to Principal Milhoit. Principal Milhoit, is there any practical information you can share with your staff as they endeavor to respond to students' social emotional needs? What information about school, district, and community resources do you want them to have as they begin listening to students and families?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, being in education, we know that this profession is so much more than teaching and learning. Oftentimes, our campuses are the cornerstone of our communities, and they can serve as resource hubs. We're in this profession to serve all of our kids, all of their families, and their communities. And so we want all of our campus team members to be armed with information to help families. We don't expect that all of our team members have all of the answers, but we want our teachers and staff to have a direction to go on where to find answers. And we want all of that to be compact and succinct in a really easy to use format. I remember when COVID hit kind of Texas in March, I would go on Twitter and I would see amazing resources that another school district was using. And then the Houston Food Bank would post some resources. And so one opportunity that my school did is we compiled all of the resources together. So we checked all of our emails and we saw what district resources we have, and we put those in one document for our families. We then looked at what other district resources do we have that are different from the ones we already have. Then we checked our community. What are resources in the Houston area that are able and possibly able to support our families? And so we created an at-home learning information and more packet that enabled our families to have one resource together. And we trained our staff members on those resources, what they are, the significance of them, and how we can provide support, if any. The resources that were in that packet were beyond teaching and learning, but we did have those elements included. So what are some at-home resources they can use? What is the Google code to our child's Google Classroom and with the teacher's number? And then we also had supports in there about housing, food places to go to get groceries and basic needs, technology resources. And we also had opportunities to make sure that we had up-to-date health services, where those are posted and how teachers and staff members can access those in order to push that information out to parents. And so I think those ways are really excellent opportunities to compile all of the resources. As teachers, you don't have to know everything, but we do expect our campus to be able to figure out how to be able to find those resources for our families and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are very powerful, practical ideas that educators around the country can use to enhance their planning for reopening. Principal Sorton, I'd like to turn to you with the last of our questions for panelists. Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. As we conclude today, what are 2 or 3 specific things principals can do to help each and every student know and feel that they're more than welcome, that they are the reason the school exists?
That is a powerful quote, Dr. Johnson, and that is the truth, because I have lived that myself. You always remember how someone made you feel. At our school community, it's very important that we greet the students and that we make eye contact with them. And what we mean by that is, for morning ingress, as students are coming in, we actually have a line of members that are checking in on students. And by a line, I don't mean like an actual, like not like in a straight row, but different checkpoints that students walk along before they even get to their classroom. So our guidance counselor, our science lead teacher, myself, and our parent coordinator. And along the way, we're checking in because students have developed different relationships with different adults, and we're able to see if anyone needs our support prior to getting into the classroom. So that's a practice we will continue. Moving forward in our new situation with the guidelines we have to follow according to CDC, we're also going to have the students check in before they get into the classroom if they need any support. So they'll be able to move their name and let us know what they need before they even walk into the classroom. And then one of the things that we vowed to do as a community is give continuous shout outs to our families and to our scholars, and it'll be visible throughout our building But in addition to that, conducting read-alouds with characters and situations that our students can relate to, so that they can see themselves and their situations in books. And with those read-alouds, we also post them on YouTube so that families have the link at home and students could access the book as often as they need. So making sure that everything we do is about our children. So whether it's on Instagram, whether it's acknowledging something awesome that they did on Instagram, posting their work, or giving them Instagram as their access to share themselves with the world, those are some of the tools that we'll be using moving forward as a community.
Those are all great answers. Those are very practical ways of helping students know that you care and that the school cares. Thank you so much. Dr. Iniguez, what are some of the practical suggestions that our panelists have offered today? Could you summarize for us some ideas that our audience might incorporate into their reopening plans that would increase the likelihood that students feel listened to, cared for, and valued? What are some of the ideas that have been presented today?
Absolutely. Some of these strategies shared today by our expert panel emphasize intentionally planning to empower students to have a voice as a way to facilitate sharing, as well as increasing student agency. For example, students may be asked to share their stories, their life stories, and these stories in turn may be told in a variety of formats. For example, students could be asked to write a narrative essay about their life experience, and this could be written in collaboration with community members. Another way is to have students respond to a multicultural literature related to expressing their feelings. Another way is to have students respond in writing to current events and perhaps comparing them to historical events, or even through poetry slams, or even stories that may be exhibited, or rather these stories can be exhibited in a variety of ways, either online through an audio format or even exhibits in the community. Another strategy that was discussed is for staff, including administrators, to be physically present on campus to reach out to students before they enter the class and hopefully help identify needs. Another strategy is reaching out to students to learn more about feelings and needs. This helps identify needs without assuming what the needs are. It also helps normalize the student struggles during this trying time. This, in turn, can be done in a variety of ways, including meeting with each student individually, either in person or virtually, administering a survey to students ahead of time, asking students to write a letter to their teacher about what they want them to know. Another shared strategy is helping students to develop a growth mindset to help increase resiliency and help them to improve their confidence in the face of learning loss and to increase their ability to communicate their struggles and feelings. Another strategy is to share or teach students how to support one another. For example, one panelist shared specific love-related language and grouping students according to the type of support that's most effective for them. Another strategy shared was helping facilitate a project-based learning where students negotiate their own group norms, increasing their agency. Another strategy specifically for families is the creation of a variety of videos. For example, creating a video that families can view ahead of time demonstrating what it's going to look and feel like when they come back to school. This also helps to answer questions ahead of time. Another type of video might be how parents and students might be able to access online learning resources. And finally, panelists also shared strategies about helping staff to support one another and to support the social emotional learning needs of students. And some of these strategies included a common reading assignment for staff that serves as a guide for focused and structured discussions during the year. Another is professional learning about how to emotionally engage with students. And finally, compiling and sharing with staff resources available to address student emotional learning needs. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent summary. We're about out of time. So I'm going to turn to Ms. Rothengast.
Thank you so much for all the inspirational speakers we heard today, and the panelists. Thank you so much. We've learned so much and had so many ideas. I encourage our audience just to pause the recording for a minute and to note 2 or 3 ideas you heard from this panel of teachers on how to listen to the social emotional issues, and may bring back to school this year as you plan to reopen. So many great ideas, but please take a minute to jot down what stood out for you today. Thank you all for participating today and taking time out of your busy schedules to watch this webinar. Please check your email on July 15th for the link to the next session in this series, Building Everyone's Capacity to Reopen to the Social, Emotional, and Academic Needs of Students. A copy of today's deck and recording will be sent to your email that you registered for. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me at sanfordinspired.nu.edu if you have any questions. Thank you so much again for joining, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Johnson for our closing statement.
I want to thank all of the distinguished panelists, our award-winning teachers, our award-winning principals, and executive coach Iniguez. And thanks to everyone in our audience. We hope you return for the upcoming sessions in this webinar series. We look forward to helping you plan for a school year that supports every student in ways that will lead to social, emotional, and academic success. Thank you.